Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I am noting that we will begin the public scoping meeting for the Project Commodore proposal just after 2 p.m. Thanks to everyone and see you shortly. Good afternoon and welcome. You are tuning in to the remote public scoping meeting for the Project Commodore proposal, seeker number 21DCP057M. My name is Olga Abinader, and I am the director of the New York City Department of City Planning, Environmental Assessment and Review Division, or EARD for short. Stephanie Chaloux, Deputy Director of EARD, will co-host today's meeting with me, and in the event of any technical challenges on my end, Stephanie will take over this meeting on my behalf. We truly appreciate everyone's patience as we continue to learn more about this remote public scoping meeting format and the challenges that it may bring. I do want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to attend today's remote meeting. And I do want to acknowledge that technology such as what we're using today, Zoom, is imperfect. However, it is an invaluable tool that allows the critical land use and environmental review processes to proceed while keeping all of us safe during this public health crisis. I would also like to emphasize that we will hear from everyone who wishes to speak today and provide testimony verbally. Our meeting will remain open until we have heard from all speakers wishing to provide testimony. We also welcome written comments and written testimony through Tuesday, January 12th, 2021, and provide written comments the same attention and consideration as comments provided live at today's meeting. Next slide, please. We will now proceed to the public scoping meeting for the Project Commodore proposal. For the record, the seeker application number for this project is 21 DCP057M. Today's date is December 21st, 2020, and the time is approximately 2:03 p.m. Next slide, please. Once again, I'm Olga Abnader, the Director of the Environmental Assessment and Review Division of the Department of City Planning, and I'll be chairing today's public scoping meeting. The Department of City Planning is acting on behalf of the City Planning Commission as the lead agency for this proposal's environmental review. As lead agency, the department is overseeing the preparation and completion of an environmental impact statement, or EIS, for the Project Commodore proposal. Next slide. Joining me today are several of my colleagues from the Department of City Planning. As I mentioned previously, Stephanie Chalou is the Deputy Director of the Environmental Assessment and Review Division. We're also joined by Edith Suchen, Director of the Department's Manhattan office, Stephen Johnson, Team Leader of the Department's Manhattan office, Diane McCarthy, Senior Team Leader in EARD, Kate Glass, Team Leader and Project Manager for this proposal in the Environmental Assessment and Review Division, and Ezra Moser, the Project Manager for the Project Commodore in the Manhattan office. I'd also like to acknowledge the team that has pulled together today to run the back of house for this public scoping meeting. Next slide, please. Together, we are here to receive your comments on the draft scope of work for the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or DEIS, for the Project Commodore proposal. The draft scope of work identifies all of the subjects that will be analyzed in the upcoming DEIS and explains how those subjects will be studied. I'll note that the draft scope of work is available on the Department of City Planning website, Scoping Documents page. Next slide, please. The purpose of today's meeting is to allow for public participation in the preparation of the draft environmental impact statement at the earliest stage possible. Toward that end, the department will have an opportunity today to receive comments on the draft scope of work from elected officials, government agencies, community board representatives, and members of the general public. We also welcome comments in writing on the draft scope of work. And as I will note throughout this presentation, written comments can be submitted through Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. Next slide. At the end of the written comment period, the Department of City Planning, as seeker lead agency, will review all comments received, including those heard today, as well as written comments received during the public comment period. After carefully reviewing all comments, the department will decide what changes, if any, need to be made to the draft scope of work. And then the department will issue a final scope of work. It is the final scope of work that will serve as the basis for preparing the DEIS. Next slide. I'll note that today's scoping meeting marks the beginning of the environmental review process for the Project Commodore proposal. No decisions will be made today regarding the draft scope of work. The purpose of today's meeting is to allow the public to provide their comments on the draft scope of work and to allow the Department of City Planning to listen to those comments. It is important for all voices to be heard today. Next slide. I will now take a moment to focus on the structure of today's meeting, which will be divided into three parts. During part one of today's meeting, the applicant team will provide a brief overview describing Project Commodore. Following that, the environmental consultant firm VHB and a representative, Nancy Doon, will provide a short summary of the draft scope of work. During part two of today's meeting, we will receive comments on the draft scope of work from elected officials, government agencies, and community board representatives. During the third and final part of today's meeting, the department will receive comments from the general public. Today's meeting will end when everyone who has signed up to provide testimony has had a chance to be heard. Next slide. On to a few logistics for today's meeting. Our protocols are intended to ensure that everyone has a chance to speak and all voices are heard. If you wish to speak today and plan to access this meeting using a computer or tablet or smartphone, please remember to register online through the City Planning Scoping Meeting for Project Commodore page of the NYC Engage portal at www.nyc.gov. www.nyc.gov/NYC-ENGAGE. A link to join us and provide your testimony will be emailed to you after you have completed the registration process on the NYC Engage portal. At that point, we will add you to our speakers list. Next slide. When it is your turn to speak, your name will be called and you will be granted temporary speaking privileges by Department of City Planning staff. So please listen closely for your name to be called. And once your name is called, we will help you unmute your microphone and you will be asked to convey your remarks. Importantly, to allow us to hear from everyone who wishes to speak today, we ask that you please limit your remarks to 3 minutes unless otherwise notified. A 3-minute countdown clock will run on the screen if you are participating online. After that 3-minute mark, your time will expire and you will be asked to conclude your remarks. Please also note that your testimony today will be verbal only. Therefore, we will be able to hear you, but we will not be able to see you. Next slide. An additional note of instruction for those of you who are joining us by telephone today. If you wish to provide testimony via telephone, please dial *9 when prompted. Please listen for me to call out the last 3 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will be given the temporary ability to share your testimony. You must press *6 to unmute your telephone and we will be able to hear you speak. And when your testimony is complete or your 3 minutes have expired, whichever comes first, you must press *6 again to mute yourself. We would like to encourage any dial-in participants who wish to provide testimony to please register via telephone using the dial-in participant hotline that we will mention throughout this presentation. Please note that muting and unmuting registered speakers may take us a moment as we continue to adjust to this Zoom remote meeting format. Next slide. A little note on time limits. As I mentioned previously, speakers from the general public have 3 minutes to provide testimony. There are a few exceptions to our 3-minute time limit. Elected officials, members of government agencies, and leaders from community boards have the courtesy of jumping to the front of the queue and are not time limited. A note to our live stream viewers as well. To those of you viewing us on live stream and wishing to testify today, please be mindful of potential background noise during your testimony. Make sure that the live stream device you're using today is muted when you begin to provide your testimony to avoid hearing an echo. Next slide, please. Once again, I'll note that any written comments will be accepted by the Department of City Planning through Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. Your comments can either be emailed or mailed. Our email address is 21DCP057M_DL@planning.nyc.gov. Comments may also be mailed to the New York City Department of City Planning, Environmental Assessment and Review Division. Attention, Olga Abinator, 120 Broadway, 31st floor, New York, 10271. If you missed any of the instructions today, please be sure to visit the NYC Engage portal at www.nyc.gov/NYC-Engage for detailed instructions on how to participate today. And we will now move on to the first part of today's meeting. At this time, the applicant will present an overview of the proposed Project Commodore project. That presentation will be followed by the environmental consultant who will summarize the draft scope of work. Next slide.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. My name is Michael Rem. I'm the Development Project Executive from RXR Realty, and I'm joined by my partner, Amir Stein from TF Cornerstone, and Nancy Doon from VHB, both of whom you'll hear from shortly. Next. We're excited to be here today to discuss Project Commodore. Next. We'll start with a brief review of the site location, review the proposed project, and explain the land use actions. Next, Amir will take you through the proposed project, mostly focusing on improvements to the public realm. And finally, Nancy will provide a brief summary of the draft scope of work. Next. The site is bounded by Lexington Avenue to the east, 42nd Street to the south, and Park Avenue to the west. Our neighbor to the north is the Grand Central Market. The interesting part about this site is that the 456 subway lines run diagonally beneath it. This is of such tremendous importance that it's been a major factor in almost all of our decisions. Next. The project is about 2.7 million square feet, of which about 2.1 will be devoted to office space, with most of the balance being devoted to a new 500-room hotel. There'll be about 43,000 square feet of retail, and that includes the MTA-controlled retail within Grand Central Terminal. And there'll also be significant public realm improvements, including subway and mass transit upgrades, and publicly accessible space far exceeding the 10,000 square feet required by zoning. Next. In seeking land use approvals for this project, we're drawing on the framework that was already established in the Greater East Midtown rezoning. Specifically, we are using the transit improvement and public concourse special permits you're already familiar with, but altering how we access them. We're also treating Lot 30, which is the current Grand Hyatt, and Grand Central Terminal as a single qualifying site, as well as making modifications to floor area, height and setback, street wall continuity, district plan elements, and publicly accessible space regulations. We're also seeking a special permit for the hotel use. We're making zoning text amendments to those existing special permits that I discussed in the first bullet. We're reducing the number of required bicycle parking spaces from 286 to 103, which we think makes sense given that we're sitting on top of the biggest public transportation hub in the country. And finally, this will be city-owned property, so another land use action will deal with the amendment and extension of the ground lease. Next.
Thanks, Michael. As part of the proposed development, we are including a series of transit improvements made possible by the demolition of the Grand Hyatt Hotel. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to take the lid off the 42nd Street subway station and repair numerous aspects of the station below and Grand Central next door. Next. On the left-hand side is the current condition of the site. And on the right-hand side is the proposed condition. As you can see, the site is completely integrated with Grand Central, to the point where it's difficult to understand where Grand Central ends and where the Grand Hyatt site begins. This is a core focus of our development. A significant portion of our ground floor space will be turned over to public use as a continuation of the terminal. Next. Here, we are seeing the transit improvements at grade. Starting on the north side of the site and working clockwise, we will be replacing the Lexington passageway to incorporate significantly higher ceiling heights, reaching up to 22 feet with a new grand entrance from Lexington Avenue. On Lexington Avenue, we are setting the building back by 5 feet, which will alleviate congestion along the avenue. On the right-hand side of the site, we will relocate R239 North to work hand in hand with a series of girder removals below grade. This will bring light and air down into the mezzanine below. R239 will also have a new ADA elevator. On the bottom left of the site on 42nd Street, we are performing a series of improvements which will generally increase the size of R238. These include moving turnstiles from the mezzanine below up to the ground floor, adding a new direct entrance from 42nd Street, installing a new diagonal stair and widening an existing stair for increased capacity, and lastly, relocating an ADA elevator from the 42nd Street entrance into R238. This will free up one of 3 historical entrances to the 42nd Street passageway. Now moving up from R238, we'll build a new transit hall. This will increase capacity for users of the subway system while also providing an area of reprieve and respite. The transit hall will feature a series of skylights, which will offer unique views of Grand Central Terminal's facade above and introduce light down into the transit hall. Next. Here, we see the existing conditions of the subway mezzanine. The mezzanine is a labyrinth due to a series of transfer girders holding up the height above, which are highlighted here in green. We have the opportunity to remove these girders and introduce a much more rational, user-friendly experience at the subway mezzanine level. Next, please. With the removal of the girders and the relocation of R239, we are able to organize and bring light down into the mezzanine space. On the right-hand side, you can see the new relocated R239 stair. In the center, you can see the increase in usable space with the girder removal. And on the left, you can see the new diagonal stair, and left of that, the increased width stair. The combination of these improvements will spread passengers along the mezzanine, decongesting the area. Next. Now, zooming out, you can see the various improvements on and off site. To reorient us, the Grand Hyatt development site is outlined in red on the right, and Grand Central is in the center. The red arrows on the left show what we call the short loop improvement. This will connect East Side access and Metro North users directly to the subway mezzanine. As currently constructed, these users need to go up into the Grand Central terminal and then go back down to the subway mezzanine. The short loop will allow 4,000 commuters per hour at peak times to directly connect to the subway mezzanine. Next. Now, moving up to the second level, we are proposing to create a series of linked terraces to provide unique elevated open space to the public. These terraces will be accessed by grand stairs on 42nd Street, and there will also be an additional entrance on Lexington Avenue. On the Grand Central Terrace, you will notice the skylights bringing light down to the transit hall below. These terraces measure far in excess of the 10,000 square feet we are required to provide and will deliver exceptional public space with novel views of Grand Central Terminal and the surrounding neighborhood. I'll now turn it over to Nancy Doon from VHB.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Next slide. I am Nancy Doon with VHB, the environmental consultant that prepared the draft scope of work and will be preparing the draft EIS. So I'm going to begin by explaining the overall EIS framework, which will be to analyze the increment or the comparison between the no action and with action conditions. So let's start with the no action condition, which is the future on the site without the project. If this project is not approved, the site would be redeveloped with an all commercial building with a floor area ratio or FAR of 27, which is shown on the left on this slide. This no action building would be constructed through non-discretionary actions and would be 69 stories or 1,118 feet tall. The with action or the project building would be a 30 FAR all commercial building that would be 83 stories or 1,646 feet tall, shown on the right. Now, these two images show the massings of the no action and with action buildings, which reflect the required zoning envelope and do not reflect the specific design or architecture of the building. Next slide. This slide provides a detailed breakdown of the comparison of the no action and with action buildings. In summary, the no action building will contain approximately 1.845 million gross square feet, comprised primarily of office space with ground floor retail and 5,729 square feet of enclosed, publicly accessible space on the ground floor. The with action or the project building would be a mixed use commercial building that would contain 2.98 million gross square feet, which would be comprised primarily of office, contain a 500 room hotel with ground floor retail. Now, in terms of open space, the draft scope noted that the project would contain 10,000 square feet of outdoor open space, which is what is required by zoning. The design has evolved since the draft scope was published, and currently the project would contain approximately 20,000 square feet of outdoor publicly accessible space. Now, the increment that will be analyzed in the EIS would be a net increase of office, hotel, retail, and open space. Next slide. The draft scope of work sets the framework for the EIS, including a description of the methodologies for the 14 technical areas that will be studied in the EIS. The framework for the EIS is based on the guidelines of the City Environmental Quality Review or SEEKR Technical Manual, and the build or analysis year for the EIS will be 2030. Next slide. Now, this slide shows all of these 14 technical areas that will be studied in the EIS. I will not describe all of these because the detailed methodology for each is described in the draft scope and also associated appendix items. But I will just note a few areas of analysis. Grand Central Terminal, a New York City and state national historic resource, is adjacent to the site, and several other historic resources are located within 400 feet. Therefore, several chapters of the EIS will study potential impacts to historic and cultural resources. The Historic and Cultural Resources chapter will assess potential direct impacts of physical changes to the resources, or as well as change the context of the resources. The shadows chapter will study the potential effects of shadows from the project on historic resources with sunlight-dependent features. And the urban design and visual resources chapter will assess the potential change to the visual prominence of historic resources. And lastly, based on screening assessments that are outlined in the secret technical manual, a few technical areas will not require analysis in the EIS because they do not have the potential for significant adverse impacts. These include socioeconomic conditions, community facilities, natural resources, solid waste, sanitation, and energy. This concludes the summary of the draft scope of work. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back to Olga. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now ask our production team to project slide number 2 with instructions on how to participate into today's meeting. All right, thank you. We will now move on to part 2 of today's public scoping meeting. At this time, we will begin receiving testimony from elected officials, community board representatives, and government agencies. If speakers do experience any technical issues that prevent them from sharing their testimony today, we will pause, then move on to the next speaker to allow for troubleshooting to happen in the background, and we will be sure to call your name at a later time. If this happens to you, please revisit the how-to guides page on the NYC Engage portal for assistance. Also, if anyone has dialed in and is listening in today and experiences technical difficulties that prevent them from speaking and providing testimony, hang up the phone, call 646-588-8656. You will be prompted for a meeting ID and a password, and the meeting ID is 982-0676-4301, 982-0676-4301, and the password is the number 1. We're ready for our first speaker. It appears that we have one speaker who will be joining us in this part of today's scoping meeting. That is a representative speaking on behalf of Community Board 5, Ms. Layla Law Jessico. Ms. Layla Law Jessico, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Layla Law Jessico. I'm the chair of the Land Use, Housing, and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. We have reviewed the draft scope of work for the redevelopment of the site currently occupied by the Grand Hyatt Hotel. We have concerns about a number of areas that we have developed in a written testimony that we will submit separately. So I would like to just underscore a few of the more pressing issues that we have. I would start by saying that the developer is proposing a qualifying development site that merges Grand Central Terminal, passageways, as well as Depew Place. Given the extreme size of the qualifying site, the resulting building presents extreme density. The formulas used to calculate any bonus for transit upgrades should be based on the actual number of square feet rather than on a ratio. So we believe that a clear blueprint on how to evaluate transit upgrade bonuses using the formula that was applied to One Vanderbilt is the proper way to proceed. This development should be held to the same standard, and this formula should be within scope. Further, we note that the proposed elevated open space has the potential to cause streetscape disruption at 42nd Street. The 42nd Street will be occupied by a grand staircase leading to this open space. While we appreciate that this open space is greater than the minimum mandated, we are concerned that the pedestrian traffic is going to be impacted and that the necessary activation at 42nd Street will be disrupted. We believe that the pedestrian should be assessed not only quantitatively, but also qualitatively, as this area requires very careful activation at the street level to be successful. Currently, the required publicly accessible open space would be located at the second and third levels of the building. An alternate proposal must also assess the feasibility of an at-grade level open space. One thought would be to actually convert Dupuy Place into an open space that would mirror Vanderbilt Avenue and would provide a harmonious streetscape experience. And it would also provide breathing room to Grand Central Terminal. Finally, the proposed density of almost 3 million gross square feet will have an impact on access to air, sunlight, and will cause shadows on the surrounding areas reaching far out. The building's penetration into the sky exposure plane will be very substantial. Shadow impact must be evaluated not only in terms of areas where these shadows will sit, but also in terms of the amount of time that these shadows will linger in specific light-sensitive areas, in particular in open space, including the open space being created through this process, this development. Those are some of the many concerns that we have raised about the scope of work. We're very grateful for the opportunity to comment, and we will share our written testimony in the coming days. And thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, and we do look forward to receiving your testimony in writing. We will now proceed to part 3 of today's public scoping meeting, where members of the general public will speak for up to 3 minutes. A 3-minute time tracker will start when speakers begin their testimony. So at this time, I would like to ask our production team to display our 3-minute time tracker. And while that's happening in the background, please, a reminder that everyone should conclude their remarks after the 3 minutes have passed. I'll now call on speakers numbers 2 through 5, so you are aware of where you are in the queue. Speaker number 2, Rob Burns. Speaker number 3, Ryan Pucos. Speaker number 4, Gary LaBarbera. Speaker number 5, Felicia Park Rogers. Rob Burns, we are ready for your testimony. Please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm here as president of the East Midtown Partnership, which is the business improvement district directly adjacent to the Grand Central Partnership catchment area and 7 blocks north of the proposed redevelopment site. Over the past several years, my stakeholders and I excuse me, have been heavily involved in the rezoning of East Midtown. And we're very excited about the possibility of development of updated commercial space, enhanced access to mass transit, and improvements to the public realm. We believe that the Project Commodore development succeeds on all levels. Redevelopment of the site will provide a huge opportunity to meet the goals of East Midtown rezoning by creating that new open space, transportation improvements, and modern office space with none of the expense incurred by the city. This development also holds the potential to help New York City begin its long, slow recovery following the COVID-19 crisis, and will have an economic ripple effect across all 5 boroughs. If you talk to anybody who works or lives in our neighborhood, they'll tell you about the great need for open space. Not only will this planned development create an outdoor park open to the public and people who work in the building, but that park will provide new views of some of our greatest landmarks, including Grand Central Terminal and the Chrysler Building. In addition, improvements to the MTA, including new entrances and exits, enhanced accessibility, ADA compliant elevators, and new escalators will greatly improve the experience for commuters, and also fix bottlenecks caused by the foundation of the existing building. The plan will also include new access to the East Side Access Project, which will remove thousands of daily rush hour commuters from an already crowded Grand Central Terminal. Finally, modern Class A office space is greatly needed in East Midtown Manhattan and will be in even greater demand as we recover from the economic slowdown caused by the pandemic. This project will deliver on that as well. I understand that an EIS will be forthcoming, and I hope that it will research and address the economic impact this development will have on our district and across the city. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is Ryan Pukos. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Ryan Pukos, and I'm a senior project manager with the Grand Central Partnership. The Grand Central Partnership is a business improvement district serving an approximately 70 square block area in Midtown East surrounding Grand Central Terminal. On behalf of our District Management Association and its board of directors, we welcome the opportunity to comment on Project Commodore. As one of the world's largest bids serving a district with 73 million square feet of commercial, residential, and retail building space, our goal is to keep our Midtown East neighborhood clean, safe, and thriving. Doing so involves supporting projects like Project Commodore, a redevelopment that is in keeping with the vision for Midtown East as one of the most competitive, transit-oriented development districts in the world. Project Commodore builds on the vision of the Vanderbilt Corridor and East Midtown rezonings by adding valuable public amenities to the neighborhood at no cost to the city. For example, the project adds critically needed open space in the form of a publicly accessible park, which will offer 360-degree views of some of our neighborhood's most iconic landmarks. The project also includes improvements to the MTA's infrastructure and enhance access to East Side access, which will greatly reduce the burden of tens of thousands of commuters a day. In addition, Project Commodore addresses a long-term challenge for our district by increasing our neighborhood supply of modern, efficient, and sustainable Class A office space. With respect to the EIS, we believe that in light of the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the city's economy, that this assessment should examine the economic impact Project Commodore will have on both the East Midtown subdistrict and the city as a whole. In our view, Project Commodore represents a critical investment in the long-term economic health of New York City and will help ensure that Midtown East remains a premier central business district and vibrant destination for New Yorkers and visitors alike. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll move on to our next speaker, Gary LaBarbera. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon. I am Gary LaBarbera, President of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York and vicinity. I am here today to testify in support of Project Commodore. The Building and Construction Trades Council is an organization of local building and construction trade unions that are affiliated with 15 international unions in the North America Building Trades Unions. Our local union affiliates represent approximately 100,000 union construction workers in New York City. Building trades mission is to raise the standard of living for all workers, to advocate for safe work conditions, and to collectively advance working conditions for our affiliates, members, as well as all workers in New York City. We thank you for the opportunity to comment on this project. We are in support of Project Commodore because it is anticipated to create thousands of union construction jobs. It is that simple. Our city, our neighbors have been devastated by the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Many have lost their lives, more have lost their loved ones, and nearly 1 million have lost their jobs. It is unfortunate and an unfortunate truth that we can't do much for those that have passed, but we can take action that will benefit the living. The proposed redevelopment of the Grand Hyatt will create family-sustaining jobs with good pay and benefits. This will include temporary construction jobs as well as permanent positions, both of which should be considered in this forthcoming EIS. The project will also provide opportunities for our city's residents to access careers in the construction industry and will spur economic growth that will benefit the city as a whole. Time and again, the construction industry has spurred economic growth in the wake of tragedy. It is because of investments in projects like the Grand Hyatt Project Commodore, redevelopment, that the construction industry is able to spark an economic recovery. We need to create jobs for our citizens. We need to invest in our city to drive our economic recovery. This project will help achieve all of those goals. We thank you again for this opportunity to testify in support of this project. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll now call on our next speaker. That is Felicia Park Rogers. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Felicia Park Rogers. I am the Director of Regional I'm the Director of Regional Infrastructure Projects for Tri-State Transportation Campaign, a regional advocacy and policy organization working to reduce congestion, pollution, and to improve commutes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this proposed development. I'd like to focus my comments on the transit improvements included in the project scope. As most of you well know, complicated transit connections at the Grand Central Complex, along with serious congestion at the 42nd Street subway entrance, have been persistent issues at this important transit hub. This scoping document shows the thoughtful approach that RXR and TF Cornerstone have developed in partnership with the MTA to maximize the window that this project can provide for addressing these structural issues, which have previously prevented major upgrades to Grand Central. In the coming years, as ridership returns to pre-COVID levels and East Side access brings Long Island Railroad service to Grand Central, it will be more critical than ever that we ensure our transit infrastructure is prepared to handle higher passenger volumes while promoting health and safety. Grand Central and the 42nd Street subway station currently suffer from significant overcrowding. This project includes a number of investments that will improve the situation. Improving riders' experience with transit helps reduce car use to the city center. More cars on the road have many damaging consequences, paralyzing traffic congestion, increasing greenhouse gas emissions and toxic pollutants, and more traffic-related deaths. The improvements that have been put forward go beyond cosmetic repairs to create a sizable upgrade to the city's public transit infrastructure. In preparing the environmental analysis, one area that we believe should be studied is the impact these improvements will have on congestion and circulation at the subway entrances and other areas of Grand Central that currently experience overcrowding. There are many improvements here that we are especially pleased to see, including relocating stairs that allow the ability to increase sidewalk widths for better pedestrian access and usage. We are very, very pleased to see the 2 ADA accessible elevators, and especially the one that has coverage to allow people to wait and stay dry in the rain. And given the current catastrophic situation with the MTA's budget, the fact that this project is entirely paid for through private developer projects is critical. We know that the MTA won't be able to do any work in the coming years in capital improvements, and these improvements will significantly improve access for disabled people and pedestrians, visitors, and workers in the area. Thank you so much for the opportunity to give comment.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll now take a moment to pause and address any of our public who has dialed in via telephone. If you have dialed in and you're listening in to our remote public scoping meeting and you would like to provide testimony today, please let us know by dialing *9 on your telephone. And that will tell us that you wish to provide verbal testimony at this meeting. Once again, please dial *9 and that will tell our team members that you wish to provide testimony at today's public meeting. We'll give folks a moment to please let us know if they would like to participate. I'd like to ask our production team to please present our instruction slide in case that is helpful to anyone else who is viewing us online. Thank you very much. Please stand by for a moment until we see if anyone wishes to provide testimony via telephone or otherwise. All right, it appears that we have no callers, no listeners who have decided to raise their hands and provide verbal testimony at this time. And we also do not have any other participants who have registered online who wish to provide testimony. At this time, we will wait approximately 5 minutes for any other members of the public or otherwise to complete the online registration process before we move ahead with the rest of this meeting, before we close it. Once again, if there is anyone else who wishes to provide testimony at today's public scoping meeting and you have not registered to speak, those using the internet to join us today, please register online now at the NYC Engage portal, www.nyc.gov/NYC Engage, or take this 5-minute pause as an opportunity to dial *9, and that will tell us that you would like to provide testimony. We'll resume our meeting at 2:48 p.m. Thank you and see you soon. Good afternoon and welcome back. You are tuning in to the remote public scoping meeting for the Project Commodore proposal. For our records, this proposal seeker number is 21 DCP 057M. Again, my name is Olga Abinator, and I am the director of the New York City Department of City Planning, Environmental Assessment and Review Division. We are currently on part 3 of today's public scoping meeting, where we have asked members of the public to provide testimony. I will note at this time that no other members of the public who have not already spoken today have signed up or otherwise registered to speak at this time. Therefore, if no one else wishes to speak at this time, we will move ahead to close today's public scoping meeting. For anyone who may have experienced technical difficulties signing on today, please recall that we will accept written testimony either via email or via our mailing address. At this time, I'd like to ask our production team to project slide number 15 with our contact information. Written comments will be accepted by the Department of City Planning through Tuesday, January 12, 2021. Comments may be emailed to 21 DCP 057M_DL at planning.nyc.gov. Or should you wish to provide comments via regular mail, please send any materials to the New York City Department of City Planning, Environmental Assessment and Review Division. Attention, Olga Abinator, 120 Broadway, 31st floor, New York, New York, 10271. Again, we will accept written comments through Tuesday, January 12, 2021. The time is currently 2:50 p.m. and today's public scoping meeting is now closed. Thanks to everyone and have a happy holiday.